As we reported last week, Alexander Jentsch, member of the Sea Org and son of Church of Scientology International's president Heber Jentsch, was found dead in Los Angeles on June 3rd. A cause of death has not yet been determined and may not be determined. Alexander is the only son of Karen de la Carrière, who was declared a suppressive person and disconnected from her family and Scientologist friends in 2010. In the intervening 2 years, Alexander was in a serious car accident in Dallas and had been self-medicating for severe back pain. According to de la Carrière, Alexander began having difficulty breathing 2 weeks ago and was treated with touch assists by Scientology practitioners. De la Carrière is not being allowed to see the body by Alexander's widow because of the SP declare, and no memorial service will be held by the Church of Scientology, even though a service is part of Scientology and was written by L. Ron Hubbard himself. The reason for this lack of memorial is widely believed because Heber Jentsch's imprisonment in the Hole, a prison run by Scientology at Gold Base in Hemet, California. A lot of this doesn't make sense, does it? Well, let's take it from the top. And to help us with that, Mark Bunker, Emmy Award-winning journalist, proprietor of Xenu TV, and known to Anons everywhere as the Wyatt's Beard Man, has joined us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. There's an update that just came through about the Alexander Jentsch Memorial. Tony Ortega, the Village Voice, just said that Heber Jentsch will be attending a memorial service at the Scientology Celebrity Center in LA on Thursday.
Wow.
They've decided, I think because of all the attention this has been getting in the press, that Heber would have to be released from the Hole, this place where he's supposedly imprisoned in Hemet, California, and brought to this event, just so they can say, yes, he has made an appearance.
Let's start there. What is the Hole?
Well, Scientology has a desert compound near Hemet, California. This is what's called the Int Base, or GOLD, which is short for Golden Era Studios. GOLD is where David Miscavige, who is the current leader of Scientology, runs Scientology. This is where all of the top executives are stationed, and these are where some of the most dedicated people in Scientology live and work. This is the top place for them to be. This location was secret for many, many, many years. Even Scientologists had no idea where this was. If you were selected to go to this base, it was a big deal.
Somewhere near the Vatican and the Pentagon is how I've heard it described. Right. Yeah.
You can drive past the compound, and some of it looks a lot like stuff you'd see at Disneyland. There's some very colorful buildings. There's a swimming pool in the shape of a ship. The film studio itself is designed to look like a Scottish castle. But then there's also this other side of GOLD, where these horrific things are going on. The Sea Org members are the most dedicated people on the planet. They sign a contract to work for about $50 a week if they're lucky. They're working 80 to 100 hours a week. And this contract goes for 1 billion years. They believe they're going to come back to life.
Did you say 1 billion years?
Right. They signed a 1 billion-year contract to come back lifetime after lifetime to work for Scientology in exchange for their Scientology services. They expect to get, the auditing, counseling sessions that Scientologists so crave. And they believe going up the bridge to total freedom, which is the increasingly expensive series of courses that Scientologists take to improve their being, it's worth signing a contract to get that bridge for free, essentially.
Right.
But also, they're dedicated people who really believe that they are the only people on the planet who can save the planet. That's why when you see Tom Cruise in a video saying, if there's a car crash, you have to stop as a Scientologist because you're the only people that can help. Not of course, paramedics or fire departments. Nobody else can really help like a Scientologist can help. But this is the mindset they have.
In this place where they've got where they're trying to save the world, where all this stuff is going on, there's also this place called the Hole, where apparently Heber Jentsch has been there since 2004.
Right. So the Hole is a double-wide trailer where the top executives who have pissed off David Miscavige, the current leader of Scientology, they are sent to this building and they're kept there under guard They sleep on the floor. They're fed, really crap, and their lives are miserable until they get back into the good graces of management. And people can be trapped there for years. I've talked to several people who were stuck in the hole, like Mike Rinder, who was the former head of the Office of Special Affairs. Now that he's left, he himself is considered by Scientologists an enemy of the church, so they've been attacking him and going after him. But he spent time with Heber in the hole, and it's a hell. It's not just execs who get this treatment. In Scientology, and this is especially true at bases like Gold, any Sea Org member who pisses off management can be sent to the Rehabilitation Project Force, or the RPF. The RPF is like a prison camp atmosphere. You're forced to work half the day, and the other half you're studying the teachings of dear leader L. Ron Hubbard.
North Korea, I told you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a lot like that. I mean, you're subjected to all of this abuse. All your mail is read. All of your phone calls are monitored. That goes for every Sea Org member at the base, but it's especially bad when you're on the RPF, because you can be split up from your husband or wife for months at a time, or even years at a time, when you can't get a contact. I've talked to people who have gone years on this, and if you're stuck in the hole, your wife can't even find out if you're having any health issues. I mean, it's really barbaric, and it can be on a whim. It could be because you made a joke. Joking and degrading is a very high crime in Scientology, and that can get you sent off to the RPF.
So I have to ask, Mark, if we know that these guys basically have a prison camp for dissenters, I mean, this is just a religious group. They're not a government. They don't have the authority of even a private prison. Why don't we have like an FBI raid like of the FLDS church in Texas? I mean, if they're holding people against their will, that's illegal. So where are the cops?
Well, the cops really aren't that interested, because it's such a complicated issue. For many, many years, the authorities have, turned a blind eye to the Scientology abuses. One reason is Scientology is notorious for attacking the attacker, and they don't want to, have to deal with the hassle that will come from taking on Scientology. And this is a group that brought the IRS to its knees. But then the other complication is that although these people are imprisoned behind wrought iron fences with barbed wire and motion detectors and spikes at the top of the gates, there's also this spiritual enslavement where people believe that they're putting up with this because Scientology is their salvation. So if the FBI raided the Gold base and they broke into the hole and they found Heber lying on the floor, he would say to them, "Oh, I want to be here. This is my religion. I'm happy here." No matter how degrading and how brutal his existence has been for years, he will still say, "No, I'm fine. I want to be here."
Yeah, I guess I hear that, but I don't imagine that the people at the FLDS church or the supporters of David Koresh would say anything different, yet we still had, right, tanks at their doorstep. This is like serious Bond villain crap here that they've got with spikes and
I sort of
wire.
Wonder if their takeover of Clearwater, Florida is on the minds of people who are watching Gold Base closely. The Clearwater is where L. Ron Hubbard landed after his time on the high seas, where Sea Org got its start, and they basically took over the town. You lived in Clearwater for a while, did you not?
I did. I spent 2 years there, and it was a fascinating time. And I interviewed people who were important players in in that period when Scientology snuck in there and took it over. They came to town under the assumed name United Churches and started buying up properties. The first two was this luxury hotel, the Fort Harrison Hotel, which had been around for decades, and it had been the central entertainment hub for the area. but it had become run down and it wasn't used that much. Well, Scientology came in and bought it for a song under a phony name, and they did that for the old Clearwater Bank building too, and that became the headquarters of the Office of Special Affairs. At that point, it was called the Guardian's Office, and these were the people who really did the nasty, dirty tricks against critics. The Guardian's Office was also in charge of, as it turned out, breaking into the FBI and the IRS and so many other government agencies and the Mental Health Institute, and they got Scientologists jobs in low-level positions as clerks, and typists and things, and janitors. And so they'd have access to all of these buildings. And they bugged the IRS so they could listen into conversations about their tax-exempt status. They systematically stole documents from these agencies for 2 years until accidentally a Scientologist got discovered. And this led to a raid of the headquarters in LA and Clearwater back in, I think it was the late 70s. I'm not sure if it was 79, but at that point they seized thousands and thousands and thousands of documents that detailed all of these dirty campaigns that Scientology was running. L. Ron Hubbard ran Scientology by statistics. You had to write down everything that you did. If it was your job to sharpen pencils, you had to write that I sharpened 12 pencils this week. And then next week, you're expected to do better than that. So they call this being upstat if you do better than the week before. So in the case of OSA, or the Guardian's Office, they would have to write down, well, we broke into these offices and we stole these documents this week. And so everything was written down. So when the FBI raided them then, they had this treasure trove that just walked them through these horrible, horrible campaigns they ran against people. Mayor of Clearwater, Gabe Casares, who I got to meet and befriend, and he actually sat down and gave me an interview years ago. They set him up on a hit-and-run accident where they had, when he was visiting Washington, D.C. for some government thingamabob, there was a Scientologist who befriended him and was with him on the trip. And she said, well, let's take let's go down this road here. And there was another Scientologist waiting for them on the road. So as Gabe, Gabe was a passenger in the car. And the Scientologist driving hit the Scientologist on the road and then sped off.
In many ways, these were self-documenting crimes initiated by L. Ron Hubbard. But if I'm remembering right, his wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, actually took the fall for this.
Right. His wife and 10 other top officials went to prison for all these crimes, which are under the umbrella of Operation Snow White. That was the program that they used to sneak into all the agencies and steal the documents. Some of the campaigns against Gabe were things like Operation Tacoless. Paul Ed Cooper was another person that they attacked.
With Operation PC Freakout, yeah.
I guess I'm a little blown away there. Why did L. Ron Hubbard not die in prison? I mean, it seems like this is insane. There's stuff with him infiltrating government offices. They've raided his offices. They've had documentation because this guy was apparently just a complete nut about documentation, detailing the ways that they use dirty campaigns against people, the way that they're breaking into government offices, they're spying on people. Why did this guy not die in a prison jumpsuit? I don't get it.
When the raids happened, Hubbard was not in the Scientology orgs at the time. His wife was, and these other people were. Hubbard fled. Hubbard spent the rest of his time hiding in the desert. This is why the location of gold was secret, and Hubbard's location was always top secret, because Hubbard was an unindicted co-conspirator in this case against Mary Sue and everybody else. But they could never serve him. They could never arrest him. They could never put him on trial. So he hid in the desert for the rest of his life, let his wife take the fall for it, never visited her in prison, never called her. This is the type of wonderful leader this man is. He died essentially alone in the desert. He had 2 handlers that lived with him, Pat and Annie Broker. There would be people who would shuttle back and forth, but very few. I mean, there were very few people who knew where he was. And this is a man who the Scientologists look up to And there's so many really unappealing aspects to his character that they're unwilling to look at. To Scientologists, they feel that, well, yeah, Hubbard had to take care because the government was after him. They just wanted to get him. They've been trying for decades to get him. So, of course, he was taken care. And they say, as Hubbard always said during that period, I've retired from Scientology and I'm just writing science fiction now.
Well, it seems like that was his job in Scientology, though, too.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff that they do, they would go after him for it, and it just builds up. It became a part of the mythology for Scientology. For example, when Dianetics was getting started, back before it was even a religion, it was just a self-help thing. The American Psychological Association and other organizations spoke up against Dianetics and how it wasn't really psychotherapy and didn't really work. And as a result, psychologists are now basically the Satan of Scientology, which is why they feature so prominently in the Xenu story.
You're right. Hubbard didn't start off antagonistic toward psychiatrists. Dianetics, which is the basis of Scientology, was cobbled together from different psychological precepts that came from Freud and so many other psychologists. But over time, they became the evil beings in the galaxy. Psychiatrists were behind every awful, horrible thing that has ever happened since the dawn of time. And they believed this. Years ago, before Scientology knew who I was, I would go to the Scientology buildings and just wander in and say, hey, what goes on in here? And they would show me around, and I would get to watch their orientation video. And I remember one day they had a 15-year-old kid babysitting me. So I was chatting with him a little bit, and he would bring up the fact about, back in the Salem witch trial days, it was psychiatrists that were behind that. And I go, well, yeah. No, I don't think there were any psychiatrists back in that day. And he said, no, I'm sorry, not the psychiatrists, but the pharmaceutical companies. No. But these poor kids who are in this cult, I mean, especially in these Sea Org members, they don't really get an education. They live, eat, and breathe L. Ron Hubbard's writings, and L. Ron Hubbard wrote some truly insane things about the field of psychiatry and basically everything else. But you were asking, why doesn't the government do anything about this? So back in the late 70s, when the FBI raided and found this treasure trove of detailed, documented abuse from Scientology, in there was also Project Normandy, which was their covert operation to take over Clearwater, to take over the media, to take over the government agencies, and seize control of the city, essentially. The mayor, and I also interviewed Lieutenant Ray Emmons, who was one of the police officers in charge of the investigation of Scientology. They told me they turned to the state government, they turned to the federal government and said, you've got to help us. Look at what we're dealing with here. You can see from these covert operations what we're dealing with. And Lieutenant Emmons said, they turned to him and said, are they going to come after me? Listen, it's a religion. We don't want to touch it. And that's really the driving factor. People are frightened to take them on, and it's so difficult when you've got a court system that will say, oh, you know what, these are religious matters. If a judge can be convinced that, oh yeah, well, we shouldn't be touching this because this is all religious, I mean, there's no help for these people.
No, there isn't. So we need to define some of the in the Alexander Jentsch case. There's a lot of terminology there that people not familiar with Scientology aren't familiar with, and one of those phrases is a suppressive person. Can you explain the suppressive person doctrine?
Yes, L. Ron Hubbard said that 2% of the population are just evil. They are suppressive persons, or SPs. And they can't be saved. You got two choices. You can either audit them up his tone scale to be above 2.0 on the tone scale, or they should be disposed of quietly and without sorrow.
Well, wait, what?
The SPs should be disposed of quietly and without sorrow. Again, a wonderful religious leader to say such a thing. Anyway, if you're an SP, you're evil, and if you're declared SP and thrown out of the church, this can really be devastating to you as a Scientologist, because probably most of your family and friends are Scientologists, and if they talk to you, they can be declared a suppressive person and thrown out. So there's a lot of pressure put on a Scientologist in good standing to disconnect from a suppressive person. So, if a husband's declared, the wife will say, I'm sorry, I don't want to have any contact with you anymore. I don't want to talk to you or see you until you get back into the good graces of Scientology. This is called disconnection. And in order to get back into Scientology's good graces, you can go through these 5 steps. They call it A to E. And it involves a lot of repenting your sins and confessing your crimes, and jumping through all the hoops they want you to do in order to say L. Ron Hubbard was right and I'm wrong and I'm sorry and here's some more money. But until then, you're facing disconnection from all your family and friends. And for Scientologists, I mean, their entire world revolves around Scientology. All their friends and relatives are Scientologists. So it's a big pressure on you to not be declared a suppressive person, because you don't want to lose everything.
So the thing is anybody can be declared a suppressive person. Paulette Cooper in Operation PC Freakout, she had an SP declare. After this episode, we may have SP declares, but only Scientologists and people with family in Scientology really kind of face the pain that comes with disconnection.
Yeah,
right.
And it really seems like we're really defining the key elements of a cult here, that they define every single part of your life to the point that your social, your professional, your religious aspects are all tied into this one group, and it could all be yanked away, and that there's this great fear of you even being contaminated just by talking to people outside of that group.
But you'd also be contaminated just by talking to one another. Another aspect of cults is thought suppression, thought-stopping techniques, which are built into Scientology. You can't think negative thoughts about L. Ron Hubbard. In fact, that's one of the questions they ask you in their security checks. They do constant security checks on people, and you, by the way, have to pay a fortune for the honor of being security checked. They have this device called an e-meter, which they use to have their therapy sessions with Scientologists. This is what Scientologists really are in it for. They love the process called auditing, which is where you sit in a room with your auditor, who is your therapist, and you're going back through painful moments in your life. And you're trying to resolve these painful moments. They use a device called an e-meter, which is a rudimentary lie detector. You hold on to 2, what were soup cans, these 2 metal cans, and they're attached to this meter, and a little electrical charge runs through your body, and there's a needle on the machine that moves, and you're asked a series of questions, and the needle moves, and the auditor will see that and go, what was that? What were you thinking right there?
I've actually seen this thing. This thing was actually at the University Street Fair at their booth in Seattle like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they use this to recruit people. They put this out there to do what they call now stress tests. They used to do personality tests, but they found that this is an easier way to get people to stop. Hey, are you stressed? Sure am. Everybody is. So you sit down at the table and grab the soup cans, and you start talking about what may be bothering you at the time. And they'll show you how the machine works. This is what they call body routing. They're routing people into Scientology. The Scientologists who are out there as body routers are looking for raw meat. That's what they call the people on the street. So once you sit down there and they say, hey, oh, you're having problems at work? We can help you with that. So they try to get you in. They try to lure you down there and start you on the bridge to total freedom, which is this increasingly expensive series of self-help courses that they sell. The e-meter, to many people, many Scientologists, that to them validates everything that Hubbard wrote. It looks scientific. Scientology has science in the name.
Does it actually measure anything? I mean, is it just a can of soup cans like a love meter at the bar, or does this actually measure something?
It's, measuring the moisture in your palms. It's a standard Wheatstone bridge. I mean, there's nothing really mystical about it. But the Scientologists, it is mystical. It's reading
your mind. It's reading your thoughts. It's locating what they call engrams. Hubbard said that when we're in pain or unconscious, we are still absorbing everything that's going on around you. Every sight, every smell, everything is still being recorded by your brain, but it can't understand exactly what's going on because you're either out or you're panicked about something, so your mind is confused. Let me mention that Hubbard has this theory of the brain that instead of a conscious and unconscious mind, he calls it the reactive and the analytical mind. Now, the analytical mind is that part of your brain that functions when you're awake and alert, and it works like a computer. It is flawless. It is recording everything you see and do, and it's being stored away efficiently like a fine computer, so you can always draw on it and grab the information that you need. When you're unconscious or in pain, the reactive mind takes over. It's still recording all of this stuff, but it's being stored in what Hubbard calls an engram, this recording of everything that's happening at the moment. So with the e-meter, an auditor is looking for those moments where you have these engrams that are maybe causing you problems currently. Say Dad beat you when you were 5, and you talk about that, what it was like, how horrible the experience was. The auditor will say, okay, thank you for telling me that. Tell it to me again. Expand on it. What do you remember hearing? What do you remember seeing? Well, maybe Dad was smoking a cigar that day. The cigar smell was in the room. And now every time you pass somebody who's smoking a cigar, you have this panic in your mind. You can't understand why it causes you a panic, but the engram in your reactive mind is making you remember that moment when Dad beat you. So the Scientologists are finding those engrams and they're clearing them from your mind.
Meanwhile, they're also recording data for their files to use against Scientologists who leave the fold.
Right. All of these confessionals, essentially, are being recorded and filed and put in folders and stored away. So, any negative thing that you may have admitted about yourself, if leave, they could pull that out and use it against you. They have done that. They of course claim that they would never do that, but they do it all the time. They go through the folders and cull things to use against people who have become critics of Scientology. This is the basic process of Scientology that Scientologists so crave, because they feel they're making progress going through their past life incidences. And when you sit down and talk to a friend and you just talk about something painful in your past, you'll feel better after it. You'll have a good cry and you go, wow, I never talked about that before. I'm glad I got that out. That's the process essentially in Scientology, but there's this layer that L. Ron Hubbard added to it that makes it look like, oh, well, this is actual science. These are engrams, and you're clearing this. So when you get into Scientology, I think there's a bait and switch aspect to Scientology, because when you get in, it's to solve whatever your problem is. When you meet somebody at the stress test table, they're trying to find your ruin. They're trying to find the thing that is really causing you problem, and then address that. In this auditing process, you are finding all of these negative things and you're clearing them out. All of Scientology is about you, essentially. It's a very self-centered religion. I want to be better. I want to make more money. I want to have a better relationship with my family. I want to make be a big shot at work. It's all about improving you as a human being. At a certain point, it stops being about you. That's when you reach the upper levels of OT3 and you discover that it's really about Xenu blowing up in a volcano. That incident is really the cause of all of our problems. That's why there's an exploding volcano on the cover of Dianetics, because L. Ron Hubbard, back around 1965, I think he said, if we put this on the cover, anybody walking past the book will remember subconsciously being blown up in a volcano, and they'll have to grab that book, buy it, and join Scientology. They believe that Xenu blew us up, and the atoms of all of these exploded beings, these thetans, kind of slammed into one another and formed clusters of thetans. And these clusters attached themselves
to our bodies and became what they call body thetans, or BTs. So once you reach OT3, you find out that it's not really the engrams that are the problem. It's these BTs that are causing the problems.
So basically the E-meter is a ghost detector?
Essentially, yes. Yes. And by the time you reach this level, you have been so indoctrinated into the Scientology way of thinking that you'll buy into it. You've seen, well, okay, this is working. There's so many facets that they use to convince you that it's all working. But, I mean, people get some benefit from it. I'm not trying to deny anybody the right to audit.
Anytime you get a chance to talk about your problems, you're going to feel better about them. It's standard psychology practice.
Oh, you said the bad word.
The process itself, when Hubbard came up with Dianetics back in 1950 and published the first book, this was a poor man's psychiatry, and it took off quickly as a fad. It was like the hula hoop at the time. People could buy the book and sit down with a friend and audit one another, and suddenly this became quite a sensation, and it was very popular for a couple of years. Now the problem is Hubbard, trying to make cash out of it, started setting up businesses with partners, and he'd open these Dianetic centers, and eventually Hubbard would run off, leaving his partners with all the bills to pay, and it fell apart pretty quickly. So by 1953, with a couple people chasing him across country for not paying bills, he decided, let's turn this into a religion, so we have the cloak of religiosity to protect ourselves in the court. So it kind of morphed into Scientology.
Also, that you don't have to pay taxes anymore.
Right. I mean, those are the two key things that he managed to achieve, and they have been those were the smartest things that Hubbard ever did. There's a telegram he sent to one of his friends, one of his partners, as they were trying to set up Scientology, and he asked this person, "So how's everything going on the religion angle? If we can get this, I know we can make it stick." Well, he did. He made it stick. Most cults die when the leader of the group dies. He died in 86, and Scientology is still around. So he put together an operation that has been pretty solid, but it's starting to fall apart now.
So another concept we went into in this case is the touch assist, which is really a faith healing technique. And so could you go into that? And I also kind of wonder, are there similarities between this and the touch assist stuff that was going on with Lisa McPherson back in the 90s?
Well, I'm not sure that I would blame the situation with Lisa on touch assist, but let me just explain what it is. It's a process where if you're having some sort of medical problem, Scientologists believe that they could come into the hospital where you are and kind of run their fingers across you and kind of move the energy fields, and they can help you where doctors can't. I've had people do touch assists on me, and I haven't, felt a damn thing from it. But I suppose if you're in a receptive mind where you think, all right, well, maybe this will help, you can be convinced that perhaps it did. But this is that technique that Hubbard created, that Scientologists believe in. Astra Woodcraft grew up in Scientology, and as a child she talked about how she would fall and bang up her knee, and her mom would make her kneel down and touch the knee to the sidewalk where she actually stumbled, so that the pain from the injury would go back into the pavement. This was part of their healing process. It's just wacky, but it's what Scientologists believe.
But it's clear in the case of Alexander Jensch that he was having breathing troubles, but instead of seeing a doctor about him, they laid the hands and tried to transfer the hurt away.
I don't know that much about the specifics of how Alexander dealt with his crises. Apparently he also was taking medications and perhaps over-medicated himself on the night of his death. By and large, Scientologists aren't supposed to not see a doctor. It's kind of a gray area, because Scientologists have signs in every building and in every book saying the e-meter cannot cure any medical ailment.
Right.
You should see a doctor.
They're mandated to say that, though, aren't they?
Right, they are mandated to say that. Anecdotally, they always talk about, you got cancer, well, you need to handle that with auditing. There have been a lot of people who have died, a lot of these powerful OTs that have died because they perhaps have not sought the proper medical care, that they've devoted too much time trying to audit away their problems. In the case of, you brought up Lisa McPherson. Lisa McPherson was 36 years old, I think, when she died. She was a dedicated Scientologist for about 15 years, I think. She had moved from Texas to Clearwater, Florida, to live and work there, to be close to the Scientology Center. She worked for a Scientologist, a top Scientologist in the city, named Bonetta Slaughter. Bonetta was in charge of all the public works in Clearwater. She was one of the bigwigs trying to organize all of the Christmas events that they would have for kids, and she was always working with the city to put a happy smiley face on Scientology.
Lisa went clear. This is the first
step in the bridge to total freedom, really. You go through your basic auditing, you clear off all the negative incidents of this life, and then you're called a clear. And then they have a big ceremony every Friday night with all the new clears. And they get up and say, "Oh, it's so wonderful, I feel so great to be clear," and everyone applauds. And a couple of months after Lisa said that she was clear, she was involved in a minor traffic accident. And when the paramedics arrived, she had stripped off all of her clothes and was walking down the street naked. And the female paramedic went up to her and said, "What's wrong? Why are you doing this?" She told the paramedic, "I need someone to pay attention to me. I need help." So they took her to the Morton Plant Hospital, which is just a couple blocks away from the Fort Harrison Scientology's enclave there. And they admitted her to the psychiatric ward. An hour later, 10 Scientologists came to the ward, tracked her down to convince her to leave there and go back with them. And they did convince her. She told the doctor, "I wanted to go with these people." Bonetta Slaughter was one of those 10 people that came to take her away. The doctors were not happy about this at all. The Scientologists promised they would take good care of her and she would get proper care. The Scientologists took her back to the Fort Harrison Hotel, where she was locked up for 17 days.
For how many days?
Until she died. 17 days she spent there.
17?
And 17 days. And there were baby watch logs. They call this, she was put on the introspection rundown, which is what they used to, Hubbard wrote this policy on how to deal with somebody who's having a psychotic break, or as they call it, she went PTS type 3, potential trouble source type 3. So in this process, you're not supposed to communicate with the person who's having the psychotic break. You can't talk to them. They're supposed to be in silence. They're supposed to be given a chance to snap out of it. And the people who were watching over her were writing down what was happening every day. So there's these baby watch logs that run through these 17 days until the last 3 days of her life, when they mysteriously disappeared. During the course of those 17 days, she lost 40 pounds. By the time they put her in a van to take her to the hospital, they didn't take her back to the Morton Plant Hospital 2 blocks away. They drove her way out to, I think it was Port Richey. There was a hospital where there was a Scientologist working, a Scientologist doctor. So they took her out to him, and they passed, I think, 5 hospitals to get out there to see him. And this doctor was frantic, going, "Why did you bring her here? Oh my God, what have you people been doing?" Well, in the baby watch logs, you can see that they were completely unprepared and unable to help Lisa. She's going increasingly insane. She's smearing her feces on the wall. She's barking. She believes she is L. Ron Hubbard. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. She's getting weaker and weaker. They're stuffing medicine down her throat with a turkey baster. The one doctor that they had that was prescribing medicine for her, I don't think ever saw her. Just prescribed it over the phone, and she didn't even have a license to practice medicine anymore, certainly not in Florida. So this was just a horror show. And Lisa died, I think, on December 5th of 1995. It took, was it a year before it was really uncovered in the press? Jeff Jacobson, who was a critic of Scientology and worked with me when I moved to Clearwater at the Lisa McPherson Trust, he, I think, was the first one to notice that in the police blotter in Clearwater, there was a notice about, a death that had occurred at this specific address, and they were asking for information about it if anyone knew. Well, Jeff recognized that as the address of the Fort Harrison Hotel and passed it along to a journalist, I believe, and that's how people started to uncover what had happened to Lisa. They were actually charged criminally with Lisa's death. The state of Florida tried to criminally convict Scientology in her death, which had never happened with any church at all in America. And Scientology fought so hard to destroy that case. And ultimately, they managed to put so much pressure on the medical examiner that she changed her opinion on the cause of death. She originally said that Lisa had died from dehydration, and she listed it as, I don't know if she called it murder or suspicious or something like that. But they put so much pressure on her, she eventually turned it around to accidental. And at that point, after years and years of Scientology spending millions of dollars to derail this case, the state prosecutor said, well, all right, we don't have a case anymore, we're dropping the charges. So that was a huge success for Scientology.
This is about when I got into to criticism, is I remember the founding, based off of this case, of the Lisa McPherson Trust, which I believe you were involved with. And it was designed to shed light on what was happening in Scientology, bring criticism to the fore, and just get the word out there. But it ended very quickly in 2001, if I remember right, because of Scientology.
Yeah, we opened our doors in January of 2000, and by the end of 2001, we had been run out of town. It was an exciting time. It was nonstop pressure from the Scientologists. The group was created and funded by Bob Minton, who to me is an American hero. I loved Bob, and I still can't believe he's not here anymore. He died a couple of years ago. Bob was a force of nature. He was a retired international banker who decided that he needed, he started looking at Scientology because of free speech issues. He saw that they were trying to shut down criticism on the internet. They tried to shut down a news group called Alt Religion Scientology, and that sparked his interest. And when he started to meet former Scientologists and hear their stories, he said, well, I'm going to do something to help you. So he started paying for lawyers for people who were being sued by Scientology, because Scientology is just a juggernaut in the court. L. Ron Hubbard said, use the court not to win, but to destroy. You can crush somebody using the court system, and that's what they do. So Bob tried to balance the scale a little bit, and Scientology hated that, so he became enemy number one. And they told him at one point, don't you dare get involved with the Lisa McPherson case. So he went, oh, well, maybe that's something I should do. And he contacted Lisa's lawyer and offered to fund the case. All the time we were getting subpoenaed, we were being brought to court. Bob was constantly being deposed. They spent about $30 million to try to shut Bob down. And it cost Bob about $10 million of his own money to fight Scientology before he said, I can't take it anymore. Once the LMT closed in late 2001, we shut the doors, but the LMT was going to continue to exist as a website. So I moved up to New Hampshire, where Bob was living, and I continued working for the LMT there as the sole employee for another half a year or so before we finally called it quits. And I was working out of his barn. He had this wonderful barn that was a couple centuries old. And on the second floor of it, it was this really nice new office he had put in. So I was seeing everything that he was going through and the hell that he was You know, every day I would show up there and think, is this the day that he is going to kill himself? Well, I find that he's pulled out a gun and just ended it all. I mean, it was really, really horrible, the nightmare that they put him through.
Jeez. Clearly, eventually, the LMT, continued on as a virtual business, but as an extant organization, it died. That doesn't mean that Scientology didn't stop harassing you, I'm assuming. How do they continue to sort of knock on your door and stuff like that?
I haven't really seen any major problems since then. I have been followed by PIs. I've been arrested by them a couple of times. Once when I was working for the LMT, and I flew up to Chicago to interview two dentists who had $20,000 on account that they were trying to get back. I was doing an interview with them I went up there and took my camera, and we stopped in front of the Scientology building to do a little bit of the interview there, and I put my camera up to my shoulder and said, okay, tell me what's happening here. Before the dentist could answer, these two leather-bound thugs ran out of the building between the dentists, grabbed me by either arm, and arrested me for trespassing while I was on a public sidewalk. I had to go back and stand trial there a year later, and the jury found me not guilty in 25 minutes. I mean, it was insane. Yeah. But I mean, for Scientology, it cost them $300. We found out in the course of the trial to hire these off-duty police officers to arrest me. It cost Bob about $60,000 trying to defend me. Because what Scientology wants is to be able to say that if you're a critic of Scientology, you are a criminal. Hubbard wrote that anyone who attacks Scientology is a criminal. All you need to do is dig up their crimes to silence them.
That's interesting because, there's the Alexander Jentsch murder going on, of course, but what's in the news right now is Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes. And it looks like Katie Holmes managed to do the right thing. She cut off things properly, and so they're solving it quietly out of court. It seems like she's kind of figured out how Scientology uses, lawsuits and the legal system to crush. What did she learn what do you think she learned, and how can other people learn from these experiences?
Well, Katie's situation is unique. From the moment they got together, there was this movement, the Free Katie movement. All the T-shirts that were up there and all the signs were out, Free Katie. People knew that going into this was nuts and it wasn't going to last. When she filed for divorce, I think the world was on her side. They wanted to see her out of this. And Katie's situation was way different than any other marriage in Scientology. The attention of the media was focused on this like a laser for a week until they suddenly decided to quickly settle and try to get this out of the news. Nobody else in Scientology is going to have the experience that Katie just had. Nicole didn't have it. When they got divorced back in, 2000, 2001, she essentially lost their adopted children. They lived with Tom. She's done interviews over the years saying what a great pain this is that she doesn't really have contact with her children. Katie managed to do what Nicole couldn't, and I think it's largely because the entire environment now in the media is so different than it was in 2000.
I think part of the reason it's different is because of the work of, I guess, the online entity Anonymous and Project Chanology, and basically the idea of Scientology trying to censor the internet backfiring on them in a huge way. In the case of that video where Tom Cruise goes on about how great Scientology is. One of the things that really interested me about this was I follow online stuff. I know we have a few people on 4chan who listen to the show. You managed to get Anonymous to listen to you. I've never seen that before. What was that like?
It was actually pretty bizarre because I had no idea how they would react. When Anonymous came out and made this video announcing they were going to destroy Scientology, it was a very scary video. I mean, I looked at this and went, oh my God. I mean, with the computer voice and the graphics and everything, I could see how if somebody was in Scientology, they would be freaked out by this. What little that was known about Anonymous at the time, when I did a Google on it, you'd see this local Fox 13 news report about them being this vicious hacker group that was, just evil and terrible. But I felt I needed to say something because I saw what they were doing. I was worried both for the Scientologists and for Anonymous. They had been calling the org and making bomb threats, supposedly, and just harassing the people who are manning the phone lines. Well, the Sea Org members who are answering the phones, they have no idea what's going on in the world to begin with, and they're not the problem. So Anonymous was only frightening and scaring these poor teenage girls, probably, who were answering the phones. And I didn't think that was going to be very effective. But I also knew that these actions that they were taking could backfire and hurt them. At the time, they were saying, well, if one of us falls, 10 others will rise. Well, that's fine for the 10 of you who didn't get caught, but for the one of you that are going to prison, that really sucks, and you should be aware of what you're doing, because you can really ruin your life with some of these, what, you consider a prank, and that's happened over the years, not just with the Scientology attacks, but with some other of the anonymous attacks, the attacks against governments and credit card agencies and things like that. I keep seeing people being arrested and going to prison for, I'm sure what they thought was a meaningless little prank. Haha, we're going to tie up their websites. Ultimately, that doesn't achieve much. Although I've seen, Anonymous's point has been, we draw attention to a problem. And they have been incredibly effective doing that, and I applaud them for everything that they've achieved. But my concern was, okay, you're going to get yourself in trouble, and I know how Scientology can take the nicest choir boy, the most mild-mannered, innocent person, and turn them into an evil criminal. So you've got an organization that's out there pretending that they're evil and dangerous. Well, Scientology is really going to use that against you, and they're going to go full bore to try to stop you.
Right.
So I was worried about them, and I made this video saying, you might want to be careful what you're doing. And they responded. I thought they might attack me. They could just come back and say, hey, shut up, what do you know?
It wouldn't be without precedent.
They didn't, which was really shocking. Now, about a half a year later, there was a period when that did happen. Tori Chrisman is another critic. Well, she was a member for 30 years, and I set her up with a YouTube channel, and Anonymous was interacting with her too. Well, at one point, they turned on Tori and me, and we were getting nonstop phone calls and death threats and horrible emails, hundreds of emails at a time coming through. And I knew this is not all anonymous. This is a couple idiot kids who are doing this. I would answer the phone, and I would hear the 14-year-old kids going, hey, is this Mark Bunker? Die! And it's just some kids who decided, okay, we're tired of this guy, and I just unplugged my phone for a weekend, and they got tired of it and moved on.
Yeah.
But that wasn't all of Anonymous. Scientology will look at the worst actions of this nebulous organization, and they'll blame it on everybody. And I knew that when I was getting these anonymous texts, it wasn't anonymous. It was, these bonehead kids. And God bless them, that's what kids are supposed to be, boneheads. I was a bonehead. I'm a bonehead now, I'm sure.
Yeah, I remember Scientology actually released a video about Anonymous, and it was leaked onto YouTube, and it was pretty hilarious, I have to admit.
I've met so many anonymous members, and they've all been really, really great. They're smart. They're showing us new ways to do things. Don't always agree with everything, but they've proven me wrong many times. Early on, they asked me before they went out to do their first picket. Some people were asking me, should we wear masks? Will they track us down? And my bonehead advice was, you know what, I think if you're going to speak out against something, you should show your face, because people won't be able to see if you're a credible person unless you stand up and say, this is who I am, judge me, but I'm not hiding. That was my theory. Well, they said, well, we got other ideas, and they started wearing the anonymous masks, which are iconic, and it draws so much attention. It really is a smart thing that they did. So I got to applaud them for many of the things that they've done. I've been incredibly impressed by how they have moved from some very early prank type of things to really having an active role in helping people in the Middle East stand up and speak out, setting up websites in different ways. When Iran shut down all communications, they were working behind the scenes to develop ways for them to get their message out, and so I applaud them for everything that they have expanded. I've got nothing really bad to say about Anonymous. I still get pained when I see that they do something stupid like breaking into a credit card company and revealing credit card numbers.
Right.
That's wrong, but they've done so many other things that are right. And the actions of one in a nebulous organization kind of tar everybody. There was a period during the last presidential campaign when Anonymous broke into Sarah Palin's emails and leaked a few emails onto the net.
But then it was another Anonymous that contacted Sarah Palin to say, listen, this happened, and we changed your password so nobody else can get in there. So within hours, Anonymous broke into her account, and Anonymous alerted her and stopped it. So are they good guys or bad guys? They're both in neither. I mean, they're this nebulous organization that I think primarily does good.
All right. So in summation, if the case we haven't made today doesn't convince the atheist community that they should pay attention to Scientology, what would you add?
This is not just another wacky religion. The wacky religion is kind of the cover for the really terrible things that Scientology's management is doing. Breaking up families, imprisoning people. This is something that we should be aware of. And especially if you're an atheist who is a young person, you should alert your friends, because Scientology is going after young people. It's very hard to get new members. I think it's important for everyone to stand up and say, wait a minute, what really is going on here? It's more than just Tom Cruise has this goofy, oddball Hollywood religion. It's people's lives are being ruined, and people should stand up and say, is not right. Check it out for yourself. Scientology's slogan is think for yourself, and ironically that's the last thing you can do as you get deeper and deeper into Scientology. So look at both sides. That's the important thing, and spread the word, because people should be aware of what Scientology really is and what it does.
All right. Thank you very much. Mark Bunker is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. He's the guy behind Xenu TV, which you can see at xenu.tv, and is known to Anonymous everywhere as Wise Beard Man. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.